The stars above the war-torn planet flickered like dying embers. It had been days since the fighting began, and there seemed to be no end in sight. The air was thick with the sounds of conflict, the distant hum of spacecraft, the booming explosions of artillery, and the ever-present crackle of communication systems. Amongst this chaos, a solitary figure moved swiftly through the wreckage. He was dressed in the standard military uniform of the Human Confederation, a medic's patch on his chest and a grim determination on his face. His name was Isaac Marlowe, and today, he had a job to do. Isaac had seen his fair share of battles. He had treated wounds from gunfire, burns from plasma weapons, and even the deep lacerations caused by alien blades. But today, the injuries he would treat were different. They were the injuries of someone important, someone who, until now, he had only seen in the royal reports. Princess Elara, heir to the Galactic Empire. The princess had been injured during an ambush, and Isaac was the closest medic on the field. As he raced through the battlefield, Isaac's boots crunched against the broken earth. The once thriving planet was now little more than a charred husk, the ruins of its once great cities scattered like the bones of a fallen giant. He had been briefed about the princess's condition, severe blood loss, multiple fractures, and internal injuries. His heart pounded in his chest as he approached the medical station set up by the royal forces. A medic waved him over. "She's inside," a man said, urgently. "Hurry!" Isaac nodded, pushing past the wreckage and entering the makeshift medbay. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and the sterile sting of medical supplies. On the table lay Princess Elara, her once pristine uniform now torn and stained with blood. She was pale, her breathing shallow, but her eyes were open, locked on him with a sense of determination that he couldn't help but admire. He knelt beside her, his hands already moving to assess her injuries. He could feel the weight of her gaze, as though she were waiting for something more than just medical attention. Her eyes were a deep shade of violet, almost unnatural, and her features were sharp, elegant, even in this state of pain. "Princess Elara," Isaac spoke gently, though his voice trembled ever so slightly. "I'm here to help you. Stay with me." She gave a small nod, her lips barely moving as she whispered, "Please, don't let me die." Isaac took a deep breath and set to work. His hands were steady as he worked to stem the bleeding, applying pressure to the wounds and monitoring her vital signs. He could feel her body's tremors beneath his fingertips as he injected a painkiller to ease her suffering. His focus was unwavering, his training kicking in as if it had become second nature. But there was something more in the air now, something he couldn't shake. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and it wasn't just the urgency of his task that caused it. He glanced up and froze. Standing at the entrance to the med bay was a figure. She was tall, regal, and as imposing as the world around her. Queen Nyx, the ruler of the Galactic Empire, stood in the doorway, her eyes locked on Isaac with a cold intensity. She was a woman of extraordinary beauty, her features sharp, with dark hair that cascaded like a waterfall down her back. But it wasn't just her appearance that commanded attention. It was the way she carried herself, the silent strength in every movement, the weight of authority that radiated from her. Isaac quickly looked away, his heart racing. He had heard stories about Queen Nyx, but never before had he seen her up close. Her reputation was one of both fear and respect. She was a ruler who demanded loyalty, and those who crossed her seldom lived to regret it. For a long moment, neither spoke. Isaac continued his work, his mind racing as he tried to block out the presence of the queen. He had to focus on the princess. She was the priority, but Nyx's gaze never wavered. It was like a silent command, an unspoken challenge. Isaac could feel her watching him, studying him, as though she were looking for something more than just a medic. Princess Elara let out a pained gasp as Isaac worked on her leg. Her hand reached out instinctively, grabbing his arm. Isaac's gaze flickered to her, and he could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else, a trust, a silent plea for him to not let her down. Isaac whispered, his voice soft but firm. "I've got you." He worked quickly, administering more fluids and stabilizing her as best as he could under the circumstances, but his mind kept drifting back to the Queen. Why was she here? What was her interest in him? He could feel her presence like an invisible weight in the room, and it was impossible to ignore. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Isaac finished his work. The princess's condition had stabilized, and though she was still unconscious, she was breathing easier now. Isaac leaned back, wiping the sweat from his brow. His body ached from the stress of the day, but he couldn't relax. Not yet. Not with the Queen still standing there. Queen Nyx stepped forward, her footsteps light but filled with purpose. She walked towards Isaac, her gaze still locked on him. There was no warmth in her eyes, no sign of gratitude, just an unyielding focus. It was as though she were appraising him, judging him in some silent way. "You've done well," Nyx said, her voice low and smooth, like velvet, but with an edge of authority. "But your work is not finished?" Isaac didn't know how to respond. His heart hammered in his chest, and he felt a strange sensation in his stomach. Was it fear? Or was it something else? "You've saved my daughter's life," Nyx continued, her gaze never leaving his. "That alone would be enough for most. But I have other plans for you." What did she mean by that? Was she threatening him? Or was there something else at play here? Something he couldn't yet understand? Before he could respond, Nyx turned and motioned for him to follow her. "Come with me," she ordered, her voice as commanding as ever. Without a word, Isaac stood up and followed her, his mind spinning with questions. The room felt smaller with every step he took behind her. He had no idea what he was walking into. But one thing was clear, his life was about to change forever. Isaac followed Queen Nyx through the narrow, dimly lit corridors of the Royal Medical Facility. The walls were smooth, white, and cold to the touch, lined with advanced medical equipment and various diagnostic machines that beeped rhythmically. It was a world away from the chaos of the battlefield, and yet the tension in the air was palpable. Nyx walked in front of him, her posture straight, her pace measured, with an air of authority that left no room for hesitation. Isaac could feel the weight of her presence in every step. They passed several guards along the way, each one standing at attention, their eyes following them as they moved. Isaac's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He had been pulled from the battlefield, from the wounded and dying, to follow a queen whose reputation was both feared and respected across the galaxy. Why had she chosen him? Why not one of the many skilled medics in the Royal Army? The sound of their footsteps echoed through the halls, and Isaac could almost hear his heart beating faster in his chest. He had treated Princess Alara's wounds. He had saved her life, but that was supposed to be the end of it. He wasn't a part of this royal world. He wasn't someone who belonged in the same rooms as the powerful leaders of the Galactic Empire. Yet here he was, walking behind the Queen as though he were destined for something greater. They finally reached the grand doors of a large chamber. It was a room that Isaac had only heard of in whispers, a place where decisions were made, where the future of the galaxy was determined. The doors opened without a sound, and Nyx stepped inside, motioning for Isaac to follow. The room was vast, the walls adorned with portraits of previous emperors and queens, their stern faces gazing down from gilded frames. At the far end of the room was a massive throne, its seat high and imposing, set against the backdrop of a massive window that offered a breathtaking view of the stars. It was a room that commanded respect, a room where only the strongest and most influential beings were allowed to stand. Nyx moved to the center of the room, her eyes never leaving Isaac as she spoke. "You've proven yourself to be more than just a medic, Isaac Marlowe." Isaac stood in the doorway, unsure of how to respond. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. What did she mean by that? He had only done his job, nothing more. He had saved the princess's life, but that was simply his duty. It wasn't something that should have made him stand out. I've seen your work, Nyx continued, her voice cool and unwavering. You don't just treat wounds. You understand the deeper wounds of the soul, the ones that others might ignore. I need someone who can see beyond the blood, beyond the pain, someone who can help guide my daughter, someone who can keep her safe.
Isaac's confusion deepened. Was she asking him to be a counselor for her daughter?
A protector? He had never thought of himself as more than a soldier and a medic. He didn't have the skills to guide anyone, let alone a royal heir. I don't understand, Isaac said, his voice betraying his uncertainty. I'm just a medic. I don't know how I can help your daughter more than I already have. Nyx turned to face him, her gaze sharp and calculating. You've saved Ilara's life. That is no small feat. But there is more to her future than simply surviving. She will need someone who understands the weight of her position. Someone who is strong enough to stand beside her when the time comes. Isaac felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? What is it that you want from me? Nyx paused for a moment, as though considering how best to explain herself. I have watched you closely, Isaac. You are more than just a soldier. There is something in you that resonates with the Empire. You possess the qualities I need: strength, loyalty, and an unyielding focus. Ilara will need someone like you at her side when the time comes to lead. She needs someone she can trust, someone who understands the true cost of leadership. Isaac was silent for a long moment, trying to process her words. He was just a medic. He wasn't a politician, and he certainly wasn't a leader. He had no place at the side of royalty, let alone the future ruler of an empire. I don't think I can be that person, Isaac said, shaking his head. I don't have the experience or the knowledge to help her lead. I've spent my life saving people, not ruling them. Nyx's expression softened slightly, though her eyes remained as sharp as ever. You may not realize it, but you already possess what is needed. You have the ability to make the hard decisions, to do what is necessary even when it goes against your instincts. That is the mark of true strength. Isaac swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. He had always believed that his job was to save lives, not take them. He had been trained to patch wounds, to stop the bleeding, to keep people alive. But Nyx was right about one thing. There were times in the battlefield when saving everyone wasn't possible. There were times when the right decision was not the easy one. But he had never considered that this kind of decision would be part of his future. What exactly are you asking me to do? Isaac asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nyx stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. I am asking you to remain by Ilara's side, to protect her, to guide her. You may not realize it now, but you are part of something much greater than yourself. The future of the Empire, of the galaxy, may very well depend on the choices you make in the coming days. Isaac felt a weight on his chest, a feeling that was both foreign and overwhelming. He had never considered his role in such grand terms. He had always thought of himself as just a medic, someone who would fix the wounds of others and then fade into the background. But now Nyx was asking him to be a part of something much more significant. She was asking him to be a part of her daughter's future, a future that seemed to carry the weight of an entire empire. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Isaac confessed, his voice low. Nyx regarded him for a moment before speaking again. Her tone softened just slightly. None of us are ever truly ready for the future, Isaac. But we must face it nonetheless.
You are more capable than you realize. And you are more than just a medic.
You are a protector, a leader in your own right. I see that in you, even if you cannot yet see it yourself. But
Isaac didn't respond. He didn't know what to say.
Part of him wanted to reject her offer, to tell her that he was just a soldier, not someone who belonged in the corridors of power. But another part of him, a part he didn't want to acknowledge, felt a pull toward her words. Could he really be the one to help guide Alara through the challenges that lay ahead?
You don't have to decide now, Nick said, as though reading his thoughts.
But know this, Isaac. The path you are on is not a simple one. It will require sacrifice, strength, and the willingness to make difficult choices. Are you prepared for that? Isaac stood in silence for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. The future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. His life had just changed. Whether he was ready or not, he had been thrust into a role far greater than he could have ever imagined. I don't know if I'm prepared, Isaac said quietly, but I will do my best. Nix gave a small nod, a faint trace of approval in her expression. That is all anyone can ask for. Now, let us prepare for what comes next. As Isaac stood there, looking at the Queen, he realized that nothing in his life had prepared him for what lay ahead. He had been thrust into a world of politics, of power, and of war. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: he would not face it alone. Whether he liked it or not, his fate was now tied to the royal family, and the path he walked would shape the future of the galaxy itself. Isaac woke early the next morning to a soft, almost unnatural stillness. He had always been a light sleeper, especially during times of conflict, and the silence around him now felt like the calm before a storm. The sterile white walls of the royal quarters were too quiet, the absence of the usual hum of activity unsettling. He had spent the night in a small private room within the royal palace, far from the noise of the battlefield that had once felt like his natural environment. The royal complex was not like any place Isaac had ever seen. It was a city within a city, surrounded by towering spires and vast halls that seemed to stretch on endlessly. There was an eerie beauty to it, a kind of polished perfection that felt out of place after the chaos of war. Isaac had only ever known the rough, gritty reality of life as a soldier and medic. This world of endless luxury and political maneuvering was a far cry from the field hospitals and war zones he had grown accustomed to. He had spent the last few hours trying to make sense of the Queen's words from the night before. Her request, or rather her command, had left him questioning everything about his purpose and his future. She had asked him to stand by Princess Alara's side, to be her protector, her confidant, her partner. It was an offer, or rather an order, that Isaac had never expected. He was just a medic, after all. He had no place in royal matters, no training to guide a future ruler. And yet the Queen seemed to think he was the one to help her daughter navigate the complex world of leadership. Isaac felt a tug of responsibility in his chest. He had spent his life focused on saving lives, one injury at a time. But now he was being asked to play a part in something much bigger, something that would require him to do more than just treat wounds. His role was shifting, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for the changes that were coming. Still, the weight of the Queen's words lingered, and there was no escaping the fact that his life had already been irrevocably altered. After a few minutes of contemplation, Isaac stood and dressed in the plain military uniform he had worn before. His clothes felt uncomfortable against the softness of the royal surroundings, but he couldn't bring himself to change into the more formal attire the palace staff had provided him. He wasn't royalty, and no matter how much the Queen seemed to want to pull him into her world, he couldn't forget who he was. A medic, a soldier, a man whose duty was to protect those who needed him, not to play politics. He left his room and made his way to the main hall, where he was told he would meet with Princess Alara. As he walked, he couldn't help but notice the difference in the palace from the day before. It felt emptier now, quieter, as though the life that had once filled these halls had been drained away. He passed several royal attendants who bowed politely as he walked past, though their eyes lingered on him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Isaac was well aware that he didn't belong in these circles, and he could feel the weight of that judgment in every glance. When he reached the meeting chamber, he was greeted by one of the princess's attendants, a young woman who seemed both nervous and excited to see him. "The princess is waiting for you, sir," she said softly. Isaac nodded, grateful for her polite words, though his mind was still elsewhere. He had no idea what to expect from Alara. The last time he had seen her, she had been unconscious, her body broken and fragile. Now he would meet her again, but this time, he wasn't sure who she would be. The door opened with a quiet hiss, and Isaac stepped inside. Princess Alara sat at a table near the window, her delicate hands folded in front of her. She looked different from the last time he saw her. Gone was the fragile, injured woman he had fought to save. In her place was a young woman who exuded both grace and strength, despite the challenges she had already faced. Her violet eyes met his, and Isaac couldn't help but notice the way they seemed to shimmer in the soft light. "Isaac?" she said softly, her voice calm and steady. "Thank you for saving my life." Isaac hesitated before speaking. He wasn't sure what to say. "It was my duty," he finally said. "I'm just glad I could help." Elora smiled faintly, though there was a sadness behind her expression that Isaac couldn't ignore. "You did more than that," she said quietly. "You gave me a chance to continue my journey. I know that my mother has placed a great deal of trust in you, and I hope that I can learn from you as much as you may learn from me."
Isaac shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for this," he admitted.
"I'm just a medic. I don't know anything about ruling an empire or guiding a future leader."
Alara looked at him with a depth of understanding that surprised him. "You may not have trained for this role, but you've already proven yourself to be a man of strength."
"You did what was necessary to save my life, and that is something that many would have hesitated to do. You understand sacrifice, and that is the first lesson any leader must learn." Isaac swallowed hard. He had never thought of himself as a leader. He had always just followed orders, done what needed to be done, and then moved on to the next task. But now, it seemed as though he was being asked to become something more. He wasn't sure he was ready for that. "I'm not sure I can be what you need me to be," he said quietly. "I don't know how to guide you or protect you in this world of politics and power." Alara's eyes softened. "You may not know now, but that's why I'm asking you to stay. We both have much to learn, but together, we can figure it out." The sincerity in her voice made Isaac's heart ache. He had always been used to the harsh realities of war, where life and death were separated by the thinnest of margins. But here, with Alara, he saw something different. A chance to build something. He wasn't sure what that something was, but he knew he couldn't walk away from it. Not yet. As they spoke, the doors to the chamber opened, and Queen Nyx entered. She walked toward them with her usual regal air, her gaze cool but sharp. Isaac immediately felt the weight of her presence, the silent authority that seemed to fill every corner of the room. "Alara," Nyx said, her voice steady, "we must prepare for what's to come. You cannot continue to hide from your responsibilities." Alara nodded solemnly, though there was a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. "I understand, Mother." Nyx turned to Isaac, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I trust that you have been explaining the gravity of this situation to my daughter." Isaac stood a little straighter, though he was still unsure of what to say. "I've been doing my best, Your Majesty, but I'm not sure what role I'm meant to play in all of this." Nyx regarded him for a long moment, her eyes assessing him like a predator sizing up its prey. "Your role is clear," she said, her voice low and commanding. "You will remain at my daughter's side. She will need you more than you know in the coming days." Isaac swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "And if I refuse?" Nyx's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Refusal is not an option. You are bound to her now whether you like it or not." The tension in the room was thick, and Isaac could feel the weight of the Queen's words settling deep in his chest. There was no escaping this. Whether he was ready or not, his fate was now tied to the princess, to the royal family, and to the future of the empire. As the Queen turned to leave, she paused at the door, casting one last look over her shoulder. "Remember this, Isaac Marlowe," she said quietly. You are now part of something much larger than yourself. Do not forget that. Isaac stood in the silence that followed, his mind spinning. The weight of the Queen's words, of Alara's trust, pressed on him like a physical burden. He had no choice but to move forward. But what that future looked like, he couldn't say. All he knew was that it would be a journey that would change him, and the galaxy, forever. The days following Isaac's meeting with Queen Nyx and Princess Alara felt like a whirlwind of uncertainty. Isaac had expected to return to the battlefield, to continue doing the work he had been trained for. But instead, he found himself in a world of politics and power struggles, far beyond anything he had ever known. He was not just a medic anymore. He was something else, something that had yet to fully take shape in his mind. He had stayed by Alara's side, just as Nyx had ordered. He had assisted her in her recovery from the injuries she had sustained during the ambush. They had spent long hours together, talking about the war, about her duties as the future ruler of the Empire, and about the challenges she would face in the years to come. Despite her calm and composed exterior, Isaac could see the weight of her position pressing down on her, the burden of responsibility that she had inherited from her mother. One evening, as they sat together in one of the palace's many quiet rooms, Alara spoke to Isaac about her fears. Her voice was soft, but there was an intensity behind her words that Isaac couldn't ignore. "I don't know if I can live up to what is expected of me," Alara admitted, her hands trembling slightly as she held a glass of water. "My mother has always been strong, always certain of her place in the galaxy. But I'm not sure if I can be the leader she wants me to be." Isaac looked at her, his gaze steady and filled with understanding. He had spent much of his life watching leaders, generals, and politicians make difficult decisions. He had seen them falter, seen them struggle with their own doubts. But in all his time on the battlefield, he had never seen someone as young as Alara carry such a heavy weight. "You're already more than what you think you are," Isaac said quietly. "You've survived things that most people could never even imagine, and you've come out of it stronger. You have the strength to lead, Alara, even if you don't see it in yourself yet." She looked at him, her violet eyes searching his face, as though trying to find the truth in his words. "Do you really think that?" she asked softly. Isaac nodded. "I've seen it in you. The way you handle yourself, even when everything around you is falling apart. That's strength, and that's what you need to lead." For a moment, Alara didn't say anything. She simply sat there, her gaze distant as if lost in thought. Isaac didn't push her, knowing that her mind was likely racing with the many challenges she would face in the future. They sat in silence for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Isaac had grown used to this quiet companionship. It was rare to find someone who understood the weight of what he had seen and experienced. But with Alara, it felt different. She understood, and somehow that made everything a little bit easier. Later that evening, Isaac was summoned to the royal chambers once again. This time, it wasn't just for medical assistance. This time, it was for something else. When he arrived, he was ushered into the room by one of the attendants, who led him into a large, grand hall where Queen Nyx was waiting. The queen was seated at a long, ornate table, her posture as regal and unyielding as ever. Her gaze was sharp as she regarded Isaac, though there was something in her eyes now, something that made him uneasy. Isaac approached her cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been expecting to see Alara, but it seemed as though Nyx had something else in mind. "Sit," Nyx commanded, her voice as cool and calculated as always. Isaac obeyed, taking a seat across from her at the table. "I trust you've been doing your duty," Nyx continued, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You've been assisting my daughter as I instructed. But there is something else I need from you, Isaac. Something that will require your full commitment." Isaac swallowed, his palms suddenly sweating. "What is it, Your Majesty?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Nyx looked at him for a long moment before speaking again, her words measured and deliberate. You have proven yourself to be more than just a medic. You have become an integral part of my daughter's life, of the future of the Empire. And I have come to realize that your role in this is far more important than I initially thought." Isaac's heart skipped a beat. What was she saying? He had expected orders, of course, but this felt different. There was something in her voice that made him nervous, something that hinted at the gravity of the situation. "I don't understand," Isaac said, his voice barely above a whisper. Nyx leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto his. "You are to marry my daughter, Isaac." The words hit Isaac like a bolt of lightning. He stared at the Queen in disbelief, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "What?" he breathed, his mind racing to process what she had just said. "You are to marry Ilara," Nyx repeated, her tone unwavering. "This is not a request, Isaac. It is a command, and you will follow it, as you have followed every order given to you." Isaac's mind was spinning. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He was just a medic, just a soldier. He had no place in the royal family. He had never even considered the possibility of marriage to someone like Ilara, especially not for something as political as this.
"But why?" Isaac asked, his voice filled with confusion and fear.
"Why me? I'm just a medic. I don't belong in your world. I'm not fit to marry your daughter." Nyx's gaze softened, but only slightly.
"It is not about what you think you deserve, Isaac.
It is about what is necessary for the future of the Empire. You are a man of strength and loyalty. You have already proven yourself to me, and now I am asking you to prove it to Ilara and to the galaxy." Isaac's thoughts were a jumble of emotions. He had been thrust into this world by chance, by circumstance, and now he was being asked to marry the future ruler of the galaxy. It seemed impossible, like something out of a dream. But the reality of it was staring him in the face. "I don't know if I can do this," Isaac admitted, his voice shaky. "I don't know if I can be the man you want me to be." Nyx leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "I do not expect perfection, Isaac. I expect loyalty. I expect you to stand by Ilara's side, to protect her, and to help her rule. In return, you will have my support, and you will have a place in the future of the Empire." Isaac sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. This was not the life he had imagined. He had never asked for any of this. But now it seemed that his path had been set, and there was no turning back. "I will not force you into this marriage, Isaac," Nyx continued, her voice softer now. "But know this, your fate is tied to Ilara's. The galaxy needs both of you, and the only way for her to lead is with someone like you by her side." Isaac looked at Nyx, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He had been thrust into something far greater than he had ever imagined, and though he didn't know if he was ready for it, he knew that there was no other choice. "I'll do it," Isaac said, his voice steady now, though his heart still raced. "I will marry Ilara." Nyx nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile appearing on her face. "Good. I knew you would make the right choice." As Isaac stood to leave, he couldn't help but feel the enormity of the decision he had just made. His life had been changed forever, and there was no turning back. The future of the Empire now rested on his shoulders, and the weight of that responsibility was heavier than any wound he had ever treated.